is going to focus on examples of collaboration between national experts of AccessibleEU with disability organizations and organizations of older people. I'm going to start by showing you a few slides now, a few minutes, where I will explain you why the input from these organizations is crucial for the work done by the AccessibleEU project. I'm going to share my screen right away. Okay. So as Jesus mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, the main goal of AccessibleEU is to create that knowledge hub, that one-stop shop where it would be possible to obtain a wide range of information and materials regarding accessibilities in the area of built environment, transport, ICT, so information and communication technologies, but also public policies such as public procurement, and really to provide those materials to have a better understanding and tools to remove accessibility barriers in all these areas. And it has 4 big objectives. One of them, considering the current state where there's a large amount of policies, legislation, standards that have been and are currently in place across the European Union. Really, the key there is to implement them. So that's the main goal there, like, is to ensure there's implementation, but also that that is done the right way and with the right people, which is another important aspect of the project, which is connecting stakeholders. We've just heard from Alejandro and Julia about the work done by the disability movement and organizations representing older people. And yeah, these partnerships, these connections are essentials because there is a lot of different stakeholders that have different level of involvement in the implementation of accessibility initiatives, which is also the reason why, like with this project, the idea is to create that one-stop shop where that would kind of show the diverse range of initiatives happening across the European Union, and also providing actually access to this information, so stakeholders could inspire from what is being made in other parts of Europe and can use the same techniques and same methodology that is used in other parts of Europe, and with a goal there, like capacity building, basically. Is to make sure that the right people are involved, there's the right connections that are made, but that people feel more empowered on what they are supposed to do and how they are supposed to implement and comply with the different policies and legislations in place. So with this, AccessibleEU is providing a range of supports offered to the public. There's lots of materials, good practices, recent news, guidelines that that we are compiling on our website and making to make it available. And so there's also another aspect of the project, which is about this capacity building, like through the organizations of events, workshops, courses, online courses as well that we provide. There was one on ICT last year, and that is going, and there will be more courses happening this year and in the next few years. So really like so that there is that place, those tools that exist, like for people to learn more about the different initiatives on accessibility and know what to do about it. There is all the networking aspect of the project to bring people together. So it's done, for instance, through the organizations of all those events happening across Europe through AccessibleEU. There are events happening at European level. like the one that Jesus mentioned earlier, big event organized on July 2nd in regards to urban planning and accessibility. It's going to be a hybrid event, so it will be held in Madrid, Spain, but you would also have the opportunity to register and attend the event online. So there is all that part of events, but also the idea is to create a community of practice composed of accessibility professionals, where they will be able to find materials, but also get help on relevant contacts as well. Very often it's about this when you start working on accessibility issues. If you are, for instance, a project planner or local planner, and you don't know where to start, and even if you have goodwill to do something good, like sometimes you need, again, the right people and to the right methodology. And so that community of practice would allow professionals to find that information and connect with the right people there. And another aspect of the project is about monitoring. As I mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of policies, legislation, and work actually already happening across Europe. And the goal there is not only with the project to provide kind of a snapshot of what is the current situation across Europe, but also to provide, the goal there is to explain the progress that has been made by the public authorities or by other stakeholders to get to that place. I think it's also key. Like it's not just to know if there is a legislation that is in place, but how is it being implemented, or how has it been developed and adopted in a relevant member state. That can be also useful to share these experiences across Europe, and that's the goal as well of the project, to provide with this information. I mentioned those European events like the one on July 2nd, but actually the bulk of the work is done by all our national experts of AccessibleEU. It's really the core of the project. There's a lot of work that is happening at national level, such as the organizations of national events. So on this slide there, you can see the names of all the national experts of AccessibleEU across the European Union, and they organize events. They are looking for recent good practices, initiatives happening in their respective countries, and also creating those connections at national level with public authorities, with the disability movement, with organizations representing older people. We are going to hear from a couple of them in a few minutes. Looking forward to it. But yeah, you've seen them there. They're also on our website, and again, like, they are essential for the success of the project, because it's really there that the work is being made. Now there's a lot of input that is essential to receive from the disability movement, but also from organizations representing older people. Input is and support essential for the work done by the national experts of AccessibleEU, but also by the whole project in general. Like it can be the dissemination of information about AccessibleEU, whether it's the organization of an event, the publication of a new relevant materials. There's the part of sharing information through members and contacts about communication, social media, like to share social media channels and those types of things. The participation to our event, whether they are European or national events organized by AccessibleEU, they are very relevant for organizations representing people with disabilities, for people with disabilities, for older people organizations. And so there as well, it has happened, and as well, and it's happening right now, that there are events that are co-organized with those organizations too. So there's a lot of cooperation that can be done this way. But there's a lot of resources, materials, contacts, information that organizations, your organizations can have and can be shared with us, with the national experts of AccessibleEU, and lots of feedback as well. Like if you feel that if you are aware of ongoing initiatives that is particularly relevant on accessibility, that is very successful, like please share this with our national experts or with us. I'm sure there's different ways to promote this, whether it's through the publication, sharing on information, co-organizations of events. There's plenty of ways to cooperate. Now I've left on this slide like the generic email box as well as the website and the QR code where you can see our community of practice, which is right now hosting on LinkedIn, but the idea there is to migrate to a more elaborate community of practice through Moodle, where there will be more actually active exchange of information and sharing of knowledge. I'm going to stop sharing my slides now. Now that I have provided you with a bit more context about why cooperation is very important between national experts of AccessibleEU and disability organizations and organizations of older people, I'd like to invite one of our national experts, Steli Peteva, to talk a bit about her experience and perspective working with these organizations in Bulgaria. Steli is director at the Institute for Community-Based Social Services Foundation in Bulgaria, where she's responsible for the provision of community-based social services for children and adults with disabilities. And
thank you, William. Thank
you're
you.
also a pleasure to work with. So I just wanted to say that as well. Steli, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello to everyone. So many partners and participants of the events. It's a great pleasure to participate and to share with you the diverse Bulgarian experience in collaborating with organizations of people with disabilities and organizations of elderly people. What I want to share today with you, 3 points that is crucial for Bulgaria. What is the actual context for collaboration now in Bulgaria? What are the visible examples and efforts of collaboration that we succeeded to achieve? What achievements but challenges and needs of change affect our work under Accessible EU? Two main group of factors describe the Bulgarian context for cooperation with DPOs and organizations for elderly people. The new legislative framework, this is the positive group of factors that affects our work, according to which organizations of people with disabilities are legitimate to participate in the policy-making process, to consult the process, to give opinions to regulations. And this is under the new Persons with Disabilities Act. Under this act, accessibility is one of the priorities of the act and the social policy in Bulgaria. The broader political and social context has more diverse influence because we are before the 6 early elections for the Bulgarian parliament now, together with the EU elections. But this situation of deep political crisis on national level affects the partnership between DPOs and the state institutions. Something more, it affects real participation of DPOs in the policy-making process. As a result, and according to the Civic Space report from this year, you can see the image of the report on the slide, there is a lack of adequate access to policy-making process in Bulgaria. And of course, the civil activism is narrowing through the last years. Anyway, what are the achievements in collaborating with DPOs and organizations for older people? We together succeeded to have active collaboration with the National Council of People with Disabilities in Bulgaria, which is a member of EDF, and which is an umbrella organization of the people with disabilities in Bulgaria. So it is a very good channel to be together and to work together with EDF and its network. We work very truthful with Bulgarian Association of People with Intellectual Disabilities with specific competence, and with the services and offices across the country. And we work with Alzheimer Bulgaria, which is a member of Alzheimer Europe, an organization, one of the very few organizations working for older people, which advocates for the rights of elderly people. What are the achievements? Under AccessibleEU, we succeeded to have very active, meaningful participation of these organizations and of their members in all national events in Bulgaria. And we succeeded to exchange information, needs, good practices, good methods of collaboration, and not so many good results. In a more broader accessibility area, which is very interesting for us, we participate with common efforts in the process of DI of people with disabilities and elderly people, DI of the institutional care, working together on the issue of accessibility of care, not only on the physical accessibility, but accessibility of products, services, technologies, equipment. And we work with DPOs, Alzheimer Bulgaria, and broader civil organizations, because we need more resources for this. What are the challenges? Again, two groups of challenges. They are mentioned somehow from the previous presenters. The first group of challenges is related with the resources of DPOs and organizations of older people. In Bulgaria, there is insufficient public funded, it's sustainable, insufficient public funding, and very limited resources on the basis for sustainable development. We talk about starvation cycle of life, not talking about the needed resources for partnership and advocacy, because you know, there is a huge need of people, time, resources, and competencies in order to advocate and participate in the policy-making process. At the same time, DPOs in Bulgaria are too diverse in their expertise. It's good on one side because we can combine expertise, but we are too very different in the level of activity and capacity to participate in policy making. That's why we, as partners of AccessibleEU, try to achieve different methods for partnership related with the needs and resources of our DPOs. The second group of challenges is related to the state of art of accessibility in Bulgaria. I couldn't miss this, because still the main focus in Bulgaria is on accessibility of the physical environment. We talk about elevators, stairs, ramps, and still our environment is not accessible. Together with this, we have very limited resources for advocacy in accessibility, lack of expertise in all crucial areas, lack of links between these expertise, and lack of trained professionals and networks. What are the crucial needs for change from our Bulgarian perspectives? Bulgaria has to work in network, not as a separate effort, for the whole process of advocacy, policy making, and monitoring of accessibility. And we need adequate tools for effective participation, both on national level, of course, on European level. And I can give you one example at the end. My organization, ICSS, and partners, some of them were presented here, are engaged in the process of public consultations of the draft law for accessibility requirements of products and services. And we have 2 weeks to make familiar with the law and to provide our feedback and concrete suggestions to this law, because it has to harmonize our products and services following the directive of European Parliament 882. So in order to be with expert opinion, suggestions, and equal partner of the state, we need concrete tool how to do this. So we need AccessibleEU support if you have such concrete tools, or if you have opportunity to share with us the products of some of the experts group, please do it. And at the end, to be with respect of my time, I want, of course, to thank you and to send you our warm regards from the AccessibleEU Bulgaria community of practice. Some of them are here from our last national event. It was last year, and it was with focus on accessibility of the environment and the services and adapted activities through the whole life cycle for active life of children, adults, and older people with disabilities. So thank you, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Telly. We'll have some time at the end of the event. Make sure, for any follow-up questions. Now is the turn for another national experts of AccessibleEU from another part of Europe to share his experience. I'm very happy today to introduce you to Per Lanero, who's the national expert of AccessibleEU in Sweden, and one of the most well-known experts and educators in the field of digital accessibility. He's also a member of National Standardization Committee at the Swedish Consumers Association, and will spend the next few minutes telling us about his experience and achievements working with the disability organizations and organizations representing older people in Sweden. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Guillaume, and hello, everybody. I will be quite brief, and I'm not planning to share any slides with you, so I hope you get to hear, or you have some real-time texting going on. Anyway, in Sweden, there is also an umbrella organization. It's called the Swedish Disability Rights Federation, or in Swedish, Funktionsrätt Sverige. And they represent 53 different DPOs in Sweden. So they are similar to the European Disability Forum, but on a national level, I believe. So this is a very strategic organization, and I've been in touch with this organization for many years previously, before the AccessibleEU, and also invited them to participate in events that I organized in other roles previously. So when I became the national expert for AccessibleEU, it was a natural step for me to keep collaborating with them. And so far, I invited the Swedish Disability Rights Federation to have a keynote slot at every event organized by AccessibleEU. And this is really valuable, I think, to have persons with disabilities represented at accessibility events. So it's really good to have them in the start of the event. At least that has worked out quite nicely. And also, they have invited me to take part in workshops and events that they organized as a representative for AccessibleEU. So the collaboration is very smooth, and I'm very happy about it. Of course, I've been in touch with other DPOs as well in Sweden, but the umbrella organization is by far the best one because they have all these contacts. So in fact, they in turn invited representatives from their member organizations to join on stage when I gave the keynote slot. So I've had speakers from a few different DPOs in Sweden, but I only had to contact the umbrella organization. So it's a really practical way to get in touch with the movement of disability rights people. The only problem so far that I've encountered was that there is no budget for the national expert to pay for traveling for the speakers at the events. And one of the events was about 600 kilometers from Stockholm, where the office of the Disability Rights Federation is. And I could not offer tickets for them to go and contribute as speakers. And they unfortunately had no budget either, so we couldn't make any collaboration for that specific event. So I had to ask local people at that other city. And of course, this was possible. And we got really nice contributions, but they were not representatives for the National Disability Rights Federation. They were just representing themselves. So overall, it's been a real nice collaboration. And I can recommend, if you have an umbrella organization, that you get in touch with them if you haven't already. And I'm also open to questions, of course, if you have some. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Par, for sharing your insights and your perspective in Sweden. Now I'd like to introduce you to Wouter Bollier, who works as a policy officer at Iedereen. Hope I pronounce it well, which is the Dutch disability platform, who is also a national member of the European Disability Forum. Iedereen is the Dutch national umbrella organizations for people with disabilities and chronic illness. And Wouter works on accessibility of ICT, websites and apps, telecommunications, crisis communication, audiovisual media, emergency number 112, and last but not least, the European Accessibility Act. Wouter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this introduction. The Dutch Disability Platform is a member of EDF. On behalf of the Dutch Disability Platform, I attend general assemblies of EDF. I contribute to EDF positions. I use EDF resources, for instance, toolkits for transposition of the European Electronic Communications Code of the European Accessibility Act. I'm also a member of different committees and working groups, expert groups like for ICT, which Alejandro already mentioned. I participate in peer support group meetings with other colleagues from other European disability organizations. And I work together with colleagues from EDF, like Alejandro, for instance, in preparing for this webinar. I'd like to start with a small description of how we transposed the European Accessibility Act in the Netherlands in Dutch legislation. The ministry responsible for coordination of the transposition is the Ministry of Health, Wellbeing and Sports. This is also in charge of the implementation of the UN Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And 6 other ministry departments are involved. These are the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Justice and Security, Ministry of Social Affairs, and the Ministry of Education, Culture and Media. The proposal to transpose and implement the European Accessibility Act into Dutch national legislation was adopted by the House of Representatives and the Senate 2 months ago, just recently. The European Accessibility Act was transposed in several domains of so-called sectoral legislation. So basically, we are talking amendments and adaptation of already existing legislation. For instance, the Goods Act, where a chapter of accessibility of products was added. Also, there were changes of legislation for the Act of Eco-Treatment, Acts for Public Transport, Banking Services, E-commerce services, Electronic Communication Services, and others. In addition to changes of these legislations, the practical implementation is facilitated and elaborated by additional national policy instruments. As for emergency number 112, that part was transposed in a so-called ministerial regulation for the national public safety answering points. As a result of this very broad transposition, there are 6 different market surveillance authorities involved. And for most of them, monitoring and regulating accessibility is a completely new task. And now I'd like to explain why it is important that disability organizations and national accessibility experts work together. As a Dutch disability platform, we are participating in a working group with all the market surveillance authorities, and we are bringing in the perspective from persons with disabilities and our knowledge about accessibility. And we do that together with the Dutch AccessibleEU expert, Mr. Erik Velleman. With our expertise of accessibility, we can help and support the market surveillance authorities. We are having conversations with them about the role of the market surveillance authorities. We provide context where accessibility requirements are not clear or concrete enough, and we help understand what things mean in practice for persons with disabilities. And we discuss how to interpret, for example, the exemption of disproportionate burden and fundamental alteration. The market surveillance authorities need both the disability organizations, the perspectives from persons with disabilities, and the national accessibility experts in order to understand and fulfill their tasks. The government and the Ministry of Health has also been facilitating a series of webinars for the economic operators, for the markets and the businesses about the Accessibility Act and accessibility requirements. Our national AccessibleEU expert, Erik Velleman, contributed to these webinars a lot. And in preparation of these webinars, we exchange expertise, information, and different interpretations of the European Accessibility Act and the national legislation. We also informed and supported persons with disabilities who were guest speakers at these webinars. Both Mr. Velleman and I have noticed that the market, businesses, economic operators, big and small, are preparing for June 2025. We are both getting more and more questions from the economic operators, and these questions are getting more specific, really very specific. Because I am a policy officer and not a technical accessibility expert, these questions are beyond my field of expertise. And there the AccessibleEU Center and national experts have to take over. As Dutch disability platform, we can give basic information about accessibility and persons with disability and their perspectives. But when things get very specific and technical, we need accessibility experts from the AccessibleEU Center and from specific sectors as well. So to sum up, why it is important that disability organizations and national experts, national accessibility experts work together, that is to inform and support the businesses and economic operators and public procurers with both disability persons perspective and accessibility expertise. To support the government, especially the market authority, the market surveillance authorities, in understanding the context of accessibility in order to be ready for them to fulfill their tasks. Disability organizations also receive a lot of questions about accessibility at the European Accessibility Act. When things get complicated we can forward these questions to the national accessibility experts. And to do that, disability organizations need to be in good contact with national accessibility experts. And of course, because nothing about us without us. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Wouter, for sharing all this very interesting information and this important work that you're doing in the Netherlands. I see that we are 12:40 now, and I am pleased to welcome our last speaker of today's webinar, Rod Bond. Rod graduated in architecture from Oxford Brookes University in 1982, launching a career that spanned hospital master planning in the USA and Pakistan to aging and place research and innovation in Europe. From 2006 to 2018, Rod founded and directed the Network Centre in Ireland, from where he supported the formative stages of the WHO, so World Health Organization's Age-Friendly Cities movement, working closely with Age Platform Europe on the age-friendly environments agenda. Rod now works independently across inclusive and sustainable housing design practice, policy and research in the public, private and NGO sectors, with a particular focus on aging and neurodiversity. Rod, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Julem, and thank you all for inviting me to join this Accessible webinar this morning. I'd like to talk a little bit about how your accessible work might be enriched by working with older people and their organizations at grassroots levels, and how the web of links, networks and networks of networks can form a sort of information-rich ecosystem reinforced by the experiences of older people in the places where they live, work and relax. But I'd like to start by noting maybe that accessibility as it relates to aging has been on a slightly different journey to that of disabilities to get to this significant point of convergence. And for me, there are three aspects that to date have contributed to these slightly different paths. Firstly, about your mandate and structure. So whilst the UN CRPD provides a very strong legal top-down framework for participation and performance of stakeholders and DPOs addressing disabilities, no such binding mandate on goals and roles is yet in place for older people's concerns. So it's approached slightly differently. Secondly, the drive from the middle. Whilst the aging agenda does have international agreements such as MIPA, the UN Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, much of our recent progress on the ground has been stimulated voluntarily through cities, municipalities and communities participating in the WHO's Age-Friendly Cities movement. We do engage nationally, but much of it is at a local level and bottom up. And I suppose thirdly, when engaging in dialogue with older people about accessibility, the agenda very often quickly spreads out to traverse rich environmental, social and economic concerns simultaneously. The agenda is obstinately holistic. As such, we need to be alert to meeting older people and their diverse groups in their contexts. And I think it usually comes down to the same three key important points that we can design for. So at an organizational level, how do we design to bring older people and their organizations into dialogues and conversations, and often into new temporary or sustained collaborative structures, i.e. new groups, communities, forums or councils? How we design to communicate, the language we use, the media we use, the places we meet, the time and the space assigned for listening, maintaining attention, and moving beyond knowledge sharing towards building mutual understanding. And then I suppose the learning, how open are we towards continuous learning and improvement, and from that to be creative and innovative. We don't need all the answers, but we do need to be courageous and often navigate ambiguity and uncertainty for a while. For those of you who may not be familiar with the WHO Age-Friendly Cities approach, while the detail can be challenging, at core it's very simple. The goal is to develop a local 3-year age-friendly city strategy and action plan, to implement it and to monitor it. But at its heart, it's about drawing upon older people and their organizations at grassroots levels to share their experiences, to perform and provide insights into what aren't working, what is working, and what could be improved, i.e. the seeds for future action. For older people, to working groups like older people's councils and forums to help convert these data into an agreed and actionable strategy, working alongside statutory bodies, the private and the NGO service providers. And then to work with these wider stakeholders to guide, monitor and review progress. An important consideration is whether these engagements are single-purpose events or if they are being planned as a continuous, regular and sustained engagement platform to last for several years. This can set up people's relationships to the initiatives and their sense of commitment and belonging to the change process. Age-friendly environment work is often organised around the WHO's 8 core themes, both in terms of capturing information and insight and in organising output and delivery. 3 relate directly to physical accessibility, infrastructure and habitat, housing, the public realm and transportation and mobility. 3 relate to the civic and social sphere, civic participation, social participation and social inclusion, addressing marginalisation, isolation and societal and personal attitudes towards ageing and particularly ageism. And the final 2 strands address community and health service provision and access to information to underpin empowerment. This is where ICT and digital can be either inclusive or exclusive. The design and organisation of these groups needs to be carefully considered, creating a safe and trusted environment for people to be happy to share their thoughts and experiences with peers. Sometimes these groups might be more geographically based, sometimes by age-related experience, the younger old and the older old, and sometimes by socioeconomic status, where there may be huge differences across neighbourhoods. We do still struggle to get good cross-community balance into these groups, where some older people are marginalised for many reasons can be hard to reach. A group that does need particular sensitivity are carers, or as their voices are both their own, but often as a proxy for the people that they care for, and the experiences and stories that they relate can be harrowing. COVID has thrown our engagement models into a new sphere, and with a major orientation towards digital platforms, more and more work is now done through Teams and Zoom and on online questionnaires being much more pervasive. I think 2 particular challenges persist. Harmonization horizontally. Many cities want to be accessible, green, digital, child-friendly, age-friendly, creative and smart. And it's hard to achieve these levels of integration without some measure of capacity building within older persons groups and organizations so that cross-thematic dialogues can be meaningful. And vertical harmonization, spanning spatial hierarchies from local to national to EU and global levels. Whilst global frameworks provide overarching structures for increased accessibility and inclusivity, the experience of much real change seems to happen only locally on the ground, where commitments have been transposed downwards vertically, or when grassroots organizations energize change through their own passions for social justice. This is where tensions can arise when you sometimes get the feeling that people just aren't listening to me. Finally, where accessible infrastructures and housing is absent or weak, social exclusion is a primary byproduct, leaving many older people marginalized and facing isolation. Many existing frameworks do not sufficiently address issues such as participation in community life, access to social networks, and protection from abuse and neglect. Access isn't an end in itself, it's a necessary enabler for participation in social and community life. Creatively working with older people at grassroots level is an opportunity for a paradigm shift from a series of transactional encounters towards a means to engender greater community building and a sense of belonging. I think if done well, working with older people at grassroots is an opportunity to foster belonging and combat loneliness and isolation. I sometimes think that along with universal design, we should be practicing design for belonging. Finally, I do think that while this new Accessible EU hub will have a huge and formidable technical agenda, I think maybe the heart of your work may be just as much around culture change, shifting attitudes through evidence, standardization and persuasion. And I really do look forward to seeing how the work of your hub unfolds in the years and months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. Now we have some time left for some questions and answers from the audience. We've been responding to a few of them so far, but I see that there's still one that is pending in the question and answer function button. at the on the screen. So let me read it to you, to all the speakers. It's in regards to the correlation between international standards, like ISO standards and European standards, and national building regulations. And the question is if there is a trend towards harmonization to create a uniform barrier-free space across the European Union. Does any one of you want to respond? I see, Alejandro, that you raised your hand. Please feel free to jump in.
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, we've seen that there are some countries that are using the ISO standard, such as, I believe, Spain and Denmark, if I'm not mistaken. And the main difference with the standard, the European standard EN 17210, is that in the international, the ISO standard, there are measurements and specific technical requirements, whereas the European standard includes mostly functional requirements, even if at the moment we are revising this European standard in light of the European Accessibility Act. Therefore, the Act, as many of you will know, does include built environment, but only as voluntary for member states. So those member states that decide, when transposing this European law into national law, to take those voluntary standards and make them part of the national legislation, I believe that was the case of Malta, for example, then they will be able to use the European standard as a means to demonstrate compliance with the European legislation. What is important to say is that both the international and the European standard are very much aligned, so there is no divergence. So if your country needs to undertake a revision of the building code, you can take inspiration from the European standard, but if what you want is to update the technical requirement, the specific measurements of the built environment, then you can look at the international one. I might say, answering the last part of the question, whether there is a trend or not, what we've seen at European level is that there is no appetite from member states to really harmonize their national laws as when it comes to the accessibility of the built environment. So all countries are very much into keeping what they have at national level. And what we are encouraging our members to do at national level is to use these state-of-the-art standards to advocate for a reform that can expand the requirements of the national legislation for accessibility to the built environment. So unfortunately, there is no trend to harmonize the technical requirements, but there is a trend to harmonize the functional requirements. So what are the elements that we need to ensure to make a building or a built environment accessible to persons with disabilities, even if the measurements may differ from country to country. So I hope this answers your question. Thank you. That's a good question, actually.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. Just a minor comment there, that Spain has not adopted the current ISO standard 21542 version yet. So, but it's just a minor correction there to be as precise as possible in the answer we provide to the audience. I do have a question myself to all the speakers. But it came to me when I was starting to listen to Alejandro and Julia at the beginning, when they talked about the joint partnership that the European Disability Forum and Age Platform Europe are doing on a lot of issues, including accessibility. And I'd like you to explain a bit, like, why, how do you see what's the added value of this partnership? I have some guess about this, like such as the to get more answers from public authorities, or to get to raise awareness to a larger group of people. But I think that'd be good if you can expand a bit, like to explain why did EDF and Age thought it would be a good idea to do this partnership and how it helps you in the advocacy in Brussels. But please, the rest of the speakers as well, like feel free to jump in as well if you have some experience there that you think would be beneficial to share as well. Alejandro, Julia, do you want to go first?
Yeah, maybe I can try to answer. Actually, I mean, I think the partnership between Age and EDF is a long-standing one. We have always worked together on many different issues. It comes also from the fact that actually the disability movement is somehow very inspiring for the older persons movement, in the sense that, as Rod mentioned, there's this UN convention that exists actually for persons with disabilities, which is, you know, inspiring and helpful as well for all the people. So it has been quite important on that sense. I mentioned the fact as well that, you know, there's some sort of complementarity in terms of knowledge and experience, which are there is a need for us to make sure that we take on board these different issues. For instance, for Age, it's quite difficult to be knowledgeable on each different needs and requirements needed by the different disability groups, for instance. So it has helped us to be more aware, actually, to take on board all these type of issues that we were maybe less aware of. Then in terms of advocacy, it's also, I mean, it's basically a matter of numbers. The more you are, the easier it is as well to push an agenda. And in that case, you know, if you put all the persons together with persons with disabilities, you reach quite high numbers. So that's also something that is really important. And there is something else I would like to mention, which might sound a bit weird, but still it's important because it exists in other types of partnership. Sometimes it helps us as well to share a little bit the role. So for instance, when we are working together on the railway sector, it's one of the areas where we have collaborated a lot, actually, working together with the European Railway Agency. Sometimes, you know, it was kind of playing the role of the bad cop and the good cop. So EDF was very much pushing for very high standards, which were indeed needed. And this is really important, you know, and maybe it was a bit easier for us to come then and to try to find a balance. So this is kind of a game we are playing sometimes, you know, between civil society organization, finding a right way to balance a bit the request and the demands we can do towards EU institutions or member states, and complement each other, which I suspect exists as well within the disability movement, where you have different types of activism and way to engage, actually. So this is something that can help as well, and where it is really important. So maybe, yeah, Alejandro and others have other ideas to share.
No, just the good cop and the bad cop strategy. No, it's for us. It's important. I mean, if you think of, and it's not so long ago, the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, the collaboration with AIDS was crucial. And I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we already knew that the impact on older people and persons with disabilities, particularly those living in residential institutions, would be huge. And thanks to this collaboration, we could go to the EU, to the European Parliament, and ask, for example, for a specific for a special committee in the European Parliament that could look at what happened and the lessons learned and really draw conclusions. And since the pandemic, we've seen that the EU has gone into more interest on working on health policies, which are very, as you know, very national. So this partnership for us is, as we mentioned, very, very important.
Okay. Well, we are now getting to the end of today's event. So I would like to thank all the speakers for sharing their experience and insights today. We learned a lot from you, so thank you, thank you, thank you. I'd like to thank as well the teams at EDF and Edge Platform Europe for their support in organizing the webinar. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with you guys, and thank you to the ASL interpreters too for being here today, and finally a thank you to all the participants for listening and raising all the very good questions and specific questions today. And with that, I wish everyone a good and safe rest of the day. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Guillaume. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.